Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of our Fearless Immunity Masterclass, where we have been going through just different things that you can be doing proactively, just to really enhance our lifestyle and making sure that we are doing everything within our power and within our control to make sure that our bodies are taken care of and that we are creating an environment within ourselves that can fight off not only just viruses, but also all kinds of disease. And so last week, we talked a lot about viruses, bacteria, understanding how they affect the body, kind of what our immune system does for us and how it works. And this week, we're going to transition into using that same thought process, that same mindset, but transitioning into basically overall disease prevention. And so we obviously know what the virus is. We really talk about how the host is the most important thing. And so within viruses and bacteria, we really want to focus on, we talked a little bit about the germ theory versus the terrain theory, and the terrain theory being all about how important it is to strengthen the host and make sure that your body is able to handle any sort of external environment. But today we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about just disease prevention in a totally different way, about how the environment that is within the host also can, on a cellular level, handle, create, develop, but also reverse, destroy disease. And so we're going to get kind of nerdy a little bit today, but it's one of those things that, I wholeheartedly believe that if you know and you understand how your body works, right, from a metabolic, from a physiological standpoint, you are armored to be able to handle and make healthcare decisions for yourself that is the best for you. And so that's what we're going to break down today, like how healthy cells function, how diseased cells function, how inflammation in the body can actually lead to multiple other diseases, how amazing our body actually is, because we are self-healing, we are self-regulating, and we were created to function and perform great. The problem is just we have basically put ourselves in a position to where we've had all these external factors, from toxicity, environmental toxins, foods that we eat, not exercising, stress, all of these other lifestyle things that are starting to affect how well our body has the ability to function. And so what we want to talk about today is a little bit of like disease prevention. So we are going to hammer about, like, kind of dive into cancer. And caveat, we are obviously not oncologists. Anything that we talk about today is to not tell you how to treat cancer. It's how to equip yourself to ideally not put yourself in a position that your body is creating and developing disease. And what I mean by that, it's like, you don't just wake up one morning and have cancer, right? And I think that's the biggest thing a lot of people don't realize, right? It's a terrible diagnosis. It's affected probably all of us. Like, we all know someone that has had cancer, has gone through treatment, has either survived and is in remission, or unfortunately has passed away due to it. And so it can be really intense. It can be really scary. And that's why I want to talk about this today, because when you actually understand what it is and what's happening in the body, you feel a little bit better about what you can do for yourself and what you can do for your family, and how much power you actually have in becoming in preventing cancer in your family or for yourself. Also, this then goes to many other diseases: diabetes, obesity, heart disease, inflammatory diseases, fibromyalgia, autoimmune conditions. So these same principles not only just apply to cancer, but when we talk about how well your body is functioning and healing on a cellular level, that is just basic disease prevention. And when we dive into that, it's not only just about, you got a diagnosis, whether that be cancer, diabetes, obesity, any of those autoimmune conditions, anything like that. You can't only just treat the disease. You must treat the disease. But if you do not address what caused the disease to develop in the first place, this is where it's going to keep coming back. And, like a perfect example is, for example, like someone gets cancer, they go through chemo or they do some sort of treatment protocol, and then we're waiting to get into remission, which is wonderful. But unfortunately, a lot of times their cancer comes back, right? Or they come out of remission. And a big thing that I see with that is because we never started addressing all of the factors that got us sick in the first place. So, another example is, like, you can take a weight loss supplement, right? Or even, not even go to cancer, but just like, that's a perfect example. You can take a weight loss supplement or some medication, and it will help you shed the pounds, right? You're going to lose the weight, you're going to get the desired results. But the problem is, if you didn't change how you're eating, how you're exercising, how you're approaching your relationship with food in your lifestyle, as soon as you stop taking that medication or that supplement, the weight's going to come right back. And so you didn't actually fix what got you there in the first place. If you're a type 2 diabetic and you had late onset diagnosis of this, and you have type 2 diabetes, you can take all the insulin in the world, but that's not fixing why you got diabetes in the first place. If you're taking insulin but still consuming a ton of sugar and consuming processed foods, which is making your body work really hard, the insulin's just keeping you in survival mode, right? It's not actually fixing the problem. And so that's why, as we walk through all of this stuff today, that's the approach that I want to talk about, is not only just addressing the diagnosis and the disease that you have been diagnosed with, but now going back and figuring out what are the steps that I can do to figure out how I got here in the first place, so that I can start reversing and addressing those things, so that once I treat, reverse, or kill this disease, right, it doesn't come back. And that's where it all comes down to the environment that's within our body now, right? So when we're taking on viruses and bacteria, we're focusing on strengthening the host, but I want you to understand what the host is made of. And so that's going to be a big deal. When we talk about strengthening the host, it's about what is the environment that's going on metabolically, physiologically within your own cells that's allowing you to function. And so if you've been essentially destroying or toxifying the environment for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years, it's not going to change in just 2 to 3 weeks. It's going to take a lot more time. And so if you get a diagnosis with, say, cancer or something like that, we have to completely change the environment so our body stops creating the cancer. It stops producing these unhealthy cells so that we have a chance to beat it. And so, step one is, let's stop creating disease within our body. Let's minimize the toxic load or the abnormal cell growth or the tumor load that is getting us into that cancer state. And then let's start testing the causes, right? What were the causes? Was it, did you have an increase in hormonal imbalances? Was it toxicity cancer? Was it something along those lines? And I'm not talking about, I totally understand that there are genetic cancers, so please do not think that that's not real. It is real, but I'm talking about the 95% of them that are lifestyle related, right? Or toxicity related. And so step 2 is to find the cancer, treat it, right, appropriately and specifically. And then step 3 is to start to strengthen, rebuild our body, and create a new environment around it so this doesn't happen again. And most disease processes happen because we've had some sort of toxic accumulation. Our body became overwhelmed and it was not capable or able to handle whatever was coming in at such a abnormal influx, right? And then we weren't helping it by, putting in good foods, healthy environment. We were having nutrient deficiencies. We weren't aiding any sort of organ, any cellular levels to start killing whatever disease is going on. And then we end up with this chronic disease development. And so the biggest thing that we want to focus on is, what can we do so that disease does not live here? Diabetes does not live within our bodies. Fibromyalgia, high blood pressure, cholesterol, viruses, right? And when you start to get the body into what we call homeostasis, which is its neutral zone of healthy functioning and healthy healing, that's when we start to see that disease cannot live here, right? And that's where we want to get you.
So if we take a look at some stats about cancer, we understand how prevalent it is. In 2004, cancer accounted for 13% of death worldwide. That's 7.5 million people, and there's an estimation that 12 million people will die by 2030. It's actually also the third leading cause of death in children. But cancer is preventable with an estimate of up to 90 to 95% of the risks through environmental changes and lifestyle changes. So decreasing your exposure to tobacco, making the right diet choices, decreasing alcohol, sun exposure, environmental pollutants, infections, stress, obesity, and physical inactivity, all of that contribute to cancer. So you got to stay away from all of these. According to the World Health Organization, the US had the 7th highest incidence of cancer in 2018. Australia was the highest, and Republic of Gambia actually was the lowest. So if we take Australia, for example, skin cancer is one of the highest down there. And the reason why is because the majority of the population is immigrants from the UK, where it's a region that has little UV radiation compared to Australia. So when you put an organism in an area that cannot adapt to this new environment, and if you're not using the right strategies to protect yourself, that's when you put yourself at risk for cancer. So that's one of the reasons why skin cancer is so high over there.
So you're basically saying these people just haven't equipped their host themselves to handle or adapt to change to that environment, and so of course disease develops in their body. That's interesting.
Another example to show how a host in the wrong environment can create disease is someone that travels a lot and that goes to a completely new region of the world. They tend to get sick from just drinking the tap water, and that's because the organism and the guts are not used to the type of bacteria found in that water. On the opposite, when you live in an environment near where the genetic is created, where you eat the food that the ancestor ate, that you're made to digest, when you have a low stress environment, cancer rate are much lower and life expectancy is much longer. So if we look at the Mediterranean countries, for example, they've been shown that they have a lower incidence of cancer than Scandinavian countries, the US and the UK. This connection could also be linked to their diet, which includes a very high consumption of fruits and vegetables, like tomato, olive oil, avocados, green leafy vegetables, nuts, fatty fish like salmon or sardines, low sugar fruits like berries.
Basically no processed foods.
No processed foods. There's a lot of research that shows that plant-based food diet have a much lower risk of cancer and other diseases like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And if we compare it to what we eat in the US, more of a Western diet with a lot of preserved meats.
So it's like your deli meats, packaged meats, that kind of stuff,
or the low-fat products and the dairy products, sugars and other refined carbohydrates, all that increase the risk of cancer.
So we're moving to the Mediterranean. Right? Okay, so this is what I said. We're going to get a little nerdy into some of this today because I want to break down just how disease processes happen and how disease works, right? So the biggest thing is the cause of cancer and all disease is when a cell becomes toxic, it becomes deficient. So just like we become nutrient deficient, it becomes deficient in being able to survive. And then it starts having a decrease in function. And when that starts to happen, that's when you start to get like a replication of these decreased cells. And so, I mean, honestly, our body is made up of trillions of cells, which grow and divide for different functions. But the catch is when cells become damaged or they become old, they're replaced by new cells, newer healthy cells. And that's a very natural thing that happens. It's what happens billions of times a day within your body. It's a normal cellular replication. That's exactly what you want. The problem is when this process doesn't happen. And so cancer, for example, is when there is an out of control growth of abnormal cells. That's why you start to get like a growth, like a tumor or a mass or something along those lines. And so the things that we've learned so far, like about cancer, doing cancer research, is that we know that cancer cells have a completely different metabolism than healthy cells. That's why you can track them. That's why you can test them. That's why you can find them on a scan, right? Because they have a completely different makeup than a regular healthy cell. And so when you look at like just how healthy cells versus disease cells function, you know, a healthy cell, it uses oxygen for fuel. It doesn't need sugar. It doesn't go out finding its own sources of fuel. It just utilizes oxygen. It has proper nerve supply. It has a great fatty, healthy cellular membrane so that it can absorb nutrients and then detoxify appropriately toxins and get rid of the waste that it doesn't want. It typically has a slightly alkaline pH, but the biggest thing that we're looking for is balance and normalcy when it comes to the pH levels. Things that we've learned about cancer cells. So cancer cells don't use oxygen for fuel. They thrive off of sugar or finding a different fuel source within your body. That's why a lot of times they can replicate at a really quick rate, is because they're like ninjas and they will go around finding whatever they can do to survive. They typically have an inflammatory environment. That's why they will show up on a scan, right? Because it'll show up as inflammation. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like using like thermography, but thermography uses the inflammatory state of an area to find out, is there an accumulation of inflamed cells in that region that basically might be leading or heading towards a cancerous growth. Okay. It doesn't need proper nerve supply. So nerve supply is really important, obviously. And it typically has a highly acidic or a highly alkaline environment. And so this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about homeostasis. So your body needs to be in neutral. Okay. And it's one of those things that, you know, everyone talks about an alkaline diet, but the problem is if you are too alkaline, that can also be a problem. There are many cancers that actually create, develop, and thrive in an alkaline environment. There's also many cancers that thrive and create in an acidic environment because it's more inflammatory. And so when we start to talk about the inflammation itself, we talk about it on a cellular level and what is happening to each cell. Is it using appropriate, you know, sources for nutrients and for fuel, or is it starting to be basically rogue? Right. And then that's why we get tested. That's the things that we look for when we're starting to test it. So when you actually start to break it down and you look at this, you're like, wow, these are things that I can do to make sure that I'm creating a healthy environment. If I don't want diseased cells, guess what's the greatest way to get oxygen to your body and to your cells? Exercise, right? It increases blood flow. As we increase blood flow carries oxygen throughout your body. Those are things that you can take control of. Guess what we can also do? We can eliminate or modify the amount of sugar that we're putting into our bodies. We obviously as Americans consume way too much sugar. We shouldn't be consuming that much. And so it's one of those things that like cancer cells or disease cells, they don't even have to work very hard, right? We're giving it to them. And so it's that. And so I always tell people, I'm like, if you've had some sort of a cancer diagnosis, or if you've had another disease process or a diagnosis of some kind, there are absolutely things that you can do to start to mitigate and aid your body through your treatment program. And then more importantly, post. And so it's making sure that you're not creating an environment to where that disease or that cancer can come back. And so that's what I talk about all the time. I'm like, even if you're going through chemo right now, and we have a lot of patients that have had a cancer diagnosis, are going through treatment protocols. And so I really focus on what are the things that you can control during this? How can you aid your body? Let's eliminate a highly processed, high sugar diet, right? Let's give your body everything that it can possibly in a nutrient dense state to survive and to thrive like it needs to. Let's make sure that even though I know you're super tired because you're going through treatment protocols, you're still walking, you're still exercising, you're getting up and you're getting movement and you're getting oxygen to your body. And then, you know, we do work with some integrative oncologists and some other places where they use things like ozone therapy and hyperbaric chambers. And there are a lot of amazing alternatives out there now that you can look into to aid your body when it comes to helping your body heal on a cellular level.
So according to the National Cancer Institute, cancer is defined as a term for a disease in which abnormal cells divide without control and can invade numerous tissue. Cancer cells can also spread to other parts of the body through the blood and lymphatic system. Like we said earlier, our body is made of a ton of cells, and every cell in the body grows, multiplies, and dies as part of the natural process. What you need to know is that we're making cancer cells at every single second of our life.
We all have cancer.
Yeah, since the minute we're born. But this natural process, there's a natural process in place to fight these cancer cells. The immune system finds these damaged cells and old cells and neutralizes them and destroy them before they grow into a problem. When this natural life cycle of cells is disturbed and when your immune system is not responding, that's when tumors develop in the body. There is three main kinds of cancer: hormone-related, inflammation-related, and toxicity-related. Like we said in the previous episode, inflammation creates a lot of negative things in the body. It's stimulating the initiation, the promotion, malignant conversion, invasion, and metastasis of cancer cells. Short-term inflammation, though, when you have a cut or a back injury or an infection, is a good thing. That's the natural process where your body is sending a signal to your immune system to heal and fight off the pathogens. However, when chronic inflammation starts to build up, that's creating diseases, including heart disease, dementia, and cancer. There's a bad assumption that bad genes are the reason for cancer, but it's actually only 10% of cancers that are inherited.
Oh, sorry, I said 5%. 10%.
10%.
10%.
90% of them are somatic and environmental. That's what we call the epigenetic. That's the effects of the environment on our own DNA. So when there's chronic infection, exposure to tobacco, airborne pollutants, silica, asbestos, poor dietary choices, you create this perfect environment. If we take obesity, for example, that's increasing your risk of cancer by 1.6-fold. It's accounting for 20 to 35% of cancers, such as liver, pancreatic cancer, prostate, colorectal, gallbladder, and even breast cancer. Last week, we talked about the fact that the immune system is 70% located in your guts. Well, there is some research that shows that IBD, which is a chronic inflammation of your bowels, are a tumor-promoting disease. The other assumption is that people tend to minimize the risk of their lifestyle, thinking, oh, I'm going to McDonald's just a couple of times a week, or I don't need to exercise, that's not me. I smoke, but not that much, I'll be fine. But the risk of cancer diagnosis is actually between 45 to 48% for both men and women. Wow. So you really have to be careful, because the other thing is that, we rate cancer from stage 1 to 4, right? The majority of people are diagnosed between stage 2 and 3. So the cancer cells, the cancer has been developing for a long time before you get to that diagnosis. So the cancer is not making people sick. You've been sick for years, and then you get the diagnosis of cancer.
Boom, drop the mic. Like, if you take anything, that's a big deal. And then what we talked about last week about like a fever, it's a good thing. It's a response in the body. It's exactly what the body is doing to survive. So guess what cancer is? The same thing. Mm-hmm. It's a survival mechanism. It's the body doing exactly what it needs to do to try to survive. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I don't think people recognize, that because we put so much doom and gloom around that diagnosis. But when you start owning how it developed and understanding the process that all goes into play to get to that diagnosis, it can actually be empowering because it gives you things to do. Mm-hmm. Like, you can do something about it. Yeah. And so that's where I think, I think that becomes a big deal.
And the other thing is that, the treatments, the most common treatments for cancer are chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. These three creates some sort of inflammation in the body, which limit the effectiveness of therapy, making it really difficult to treat cancer. And that's why there is so many cancers that come back a few years later. So you really need to address how and why this cancer happened in the first place, if you really want to get all the chances on your side to
stay in remission.
To stay in remission. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's like the action steps so that you can make sure you don't end up with that kind of diagnosis.
So the biggest thing is the philosophy of disease prevention is, in order to embrace real prevention, we have to stop doing the things that got us here in the first place, right? And then all of those other preventative strategies that he just talked about will actually have a chance to work. Mm-hmm. And that's when things, and it won't only work, it'll work long term.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that we're looking at. So when it comes to it, we are going to start talking through some of the things that you actually can do. And so when we talk about mindset and the 5 essentials, within our office, which is like mindset and stress management, proper chiropractic care to make sure that your body's healing and moving with no interference, making sure that we're putting good quality food into our bodies through quality nutrition. Exercise is vital, not only just to look good and have a six-pack, but it's because your body needs it on a cellular level.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have exercise or some sort of movement patterns every single day to give your body a chance to get the amount of oxygen that it needs to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And then our last essential is obviously minimizing your exposure to toxins. And so a lot of people don't even know that those are our 5 core values in our office. And that's why another thing I thought this entire workshop was so important, so that we can continue to give you guys just information and resources to start utilizing those things. And so I use all of these things. I just think they're functional aspects of every single day life that we should be incorporating in, because it's just normal health prevention or normal disease prevention, so that you can stay healthy, right? And that's what things, it's like, it's a lot harder to gain your health back once you've lost it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that I think I've seen as I talk to patients about, they've had cancer, right? And people, unfortunately, like, you've seen them go into medical debt, you've seen them lose their health, lose their lifestyle, lose their strength, lose so many things. And that's probably one of the most powerful things that I could probably hand out today is like, once you've lost your health, it is really hard to get it back. Mm-hmm. And so why aren't we focusing on all the things that we can do to make sure that doesn't happen? And so when we talk about like stress, right? So there's, a study back in 2010. So it'll be interesting to see the studies that come out after 2020. I will tell you that. But the studies that come out after, 2020 and the amount of stress that we've gone into. So back in 2010, we already knew that stress actually causes a 30-fold increase in the spread of cancer throughout the body. And they did this test on mice that were stressed and those that were not stressed. And so we know that stress affects everything, and everyone unfortunately has stress. A lot of people just don't have stress coping mechanisms. And so the biggest thing with stress is, it obviously affects our energy production. It increases inflammation within the body. It can push us more to that acidic side when we're talking about the pH balance within the body. It reduces our immune function that we talked about last week. So stress actually makes us more susceptible to getting sick. It increases our blood pressure. It can change brain chemistry. It obviously causes hormonal imbalances. And so it's one of those things that it can just really start to create this entire situation that our body is not functioning. And when that starts to happen, and it's, increasing the amount of like growth promoting hormones that can transition into cancer, that becomes a problem. And so what we want to start focusing on is, what can you do to start managing that stress? Mm-hmm. And so these were just some mindset things. So a big thing is, I don't know if you've ever practiced mindfulness, but it is a big deal. And so in understanding that, there are differences in stresses, and I'm going to break down parasympathetic, sympathetic stress and that kind of stuff in a second. But, stress, there's immediate stress, like someone cut you off on the interstate, and then there's chronic stress. And unfortunately, I do think that a lot of people at this point are feeling this chronic stress, because this has been going on for months. Our lives have been altered. Everything has changed. There is no way that what's been going on, not only in our country, but in our world, hasn't affected something throughout your life. And that does become stressful. And so it's these prolonged stresses that can really start to take a toll. And the worst part is it's developing over time. It's typically not immediate. Yeah. Right. And so that's where, by really jumping on this right now and starting to do some small things to help your body in this stress state, is a big deal. So like, practicing mindfulness, whether that be like gratitude journaling, that kind of stuff, is a big deal. There's a thing called the Calm app, which is really nice. You can use that. Meditation, if you've never tried it, it's not always just sitting there for an hour going, there's a lot of different ways to meditate.
5-10 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. You can meditate within 5 minutes. It's just practice. It's quiet time. It's a shutdown. It's a clearing of the brain. Journaling, technology detox right now, I think, is really important for people. Even Dr. Nico said he went camping this past weekend. And although camping was fun, the biggest thing you took away from it is you're
completely disconnected from a phone.
Yeah, your phone was gone, right?
Yeah.
And people forget like how attached these things become to us. And it's because it's constantly stimulating. We're constantly checking things. It's dinging, and it just keeps going, and it never stops. So I really really recommend doing technology detoxes, you know, and switching that and challenging your brain in a totally different way through reading, through puzzles. I don't know if you guys have ever worked on grounding before, but grounding is amazing. It's getting out, you know, in your backyard, in the grass, becoming one with nature, getting your hands and your bare feet into the earth. I know it sounds crazy, but you could think I'm weird, but there are different energies and that kind of stuff that happen, and it really does help you kind of decompress a little bit to just give some of that stuff away. I told Dr. Jason the other day I was super stressed out, and I was like, I know this is going to sound weird, but I started just wiping it off. I was like, I'm just going to physically wipe the stress off my shoulders and see if that works, right? And weirdly enough, it did.
Whatever
it really
works.
helped, right? All right, so those are some things that you can do. And also getting adjusted makes you feel really good too. So make sure you're making your appointments right now. I always tell people when you're stressed, it is more important to get adjusted than it is to push your adjustment off because you're too busy or you're too stressed. And so we know that by getting adjusted, it's going to help with just that physical stress that your body's carrying. It's going to release the good hormones within your body. It's going to make you feel a whole lot looser and a whole lot lighter, and make sure that your body is functioning as close to 100% as we can. So we're going to give you some nutrition tips today. So obviously we know that you are what you eat, right? But we're going to take it another level deeper to where you aren't just what you eat, you are what you eat eats as well. And so we are going to talk about all of the different things that we put into our bodies. Are you doing this one? I did.
You're doing.
Oh, I'm doing this one. Okay, got it. So the difference between damaged fats and good fats. And so what I think is super interesting is we focus a lot on inflammation. And the reason I wanted to put the fats into this particular PowerPoint was because we've been talking about inflammation. And so when it comes to fat, a lot of people think fat is bad, but actually fat is really good for you. But we're going to be talking about the good fats versus the damaged fats. So fat is critical. You know, it's the foundation for our hormones. It helps set our cholesterol levels, neurotransmitters for our brain. Our nervous system needs it because guess what? Good healthy fat covers our brain, and it's a really great anti-inflammatory. Now the catch though is when it comes to fat, we can get nerdy about it, but there's omega-6s and omega-3s. So omega-6s are those inflammatory fats. And so these are, you know, these are what we call the bad fats, the trans fats. So some things like vegetable oils, corn oils, canola oil, a lot of these processed oils actually have a higher ratio of omega-6s, which causes an inflammatory response within the body, compared to these good fats, which are things like your omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. And so these help boost brain health, your heart health. They promote good cholesterol and anti-inflammatory on a cellular level. So the things that we want to start incorporating is getting more of those omega-3s into our body versus the amount of omega-6s. And the way that you do that is by, you know, switching to things like coconut oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil, using these good healthy oils, including more cold water fishes, wild caught salmons, wild caught fishes, good nuts and seeds, avocados. You know, there's a great way to get a lot of healthier fats into our diet every single day. So I always say if you're consuming a protein or anything like that, you should be consuming a good quality fat with it to help your body absorb all of those nutrients. And so another thing that we look at too, when it comes to what we're putting into our bodies, is going to be also our meats and the protein in general. And so Dr. Nico just talked about, you know, the three basic cancers are hormonal and toxicity, right? And so one of the things that we can control is where our food is coming from. And so you aren't just what you eat, but you are what you eat. And so if you're consuming like commercial raised chicken and commercial raised beef products, you have to think about it. A lot of times these chickens and these cows, they're fed grains, they're fed corn, right? They're fed soy sometimes. And so you're consuming those very inflammatory foods through consuming that product. And so when we start wondering like, man, I feel like I'm doing really good, but if you're still consuming those commercial meats, then you're still putting you're still consuming foods that are causing an inflammatory response within your body. So that becomes toxic. And then you have to add in the other things. Heaven forbid they're spraying any of that stuff with chemicals or toxins. That can be a problem. Or if you are getting grass-fed cows, but they're spraying the grass with toxins, you know, the cows are still eating that and then you're eating the cows, compared to a lot of our like pasture-raised products where they are focusing on grass-fed, pasture-raised foods. They're not being fed corns and grains. And then when it comes to hormonal cancers, when we have to start talking about like the cause of some of these things, if you're consuming commercial meats or processed meats that have been injected with antibiotics. They have been injected with growth hormone, essentially, so that they can slaughter them faster. And you're consuming that. That's going to cause a hormonal imbalance within your body, because now you're consuming these hormones, like, and growth hormone. And so that's one of the things that, you know, I've even talked about. I'd be interested to look into even a little bit more. But, you know, we've seen hormonal cancers in kids and in teenagers at a much higher rate in the last 25 years. But then you start placing it back to the amount of dairy consumption and the amount of processed and commercial meats and foods that they're consuming. I think that they're getting a whole lot more hormones from their diet than anything, and that's causing imbalances within the body. So it's really interesting to start looking at that. So I always tell patients that if you have to choose, if we're being budget friendly on whether I buy all organic vegetables and fruits and that kind of stuff, or I buy organic meat, put your money in your meats, right? I would much rather you do that and buy high quality meat and protein, and do commercial fruits and vegetables than eating those commercial meats. So that, I think, is something that's very much so within your control. And like he said, in the United States, we eat more processed, like, deli meats and stuff. And so when it comes to like our meats, and I'm talking about things like hot dog, salami, sausages, pork, all of our basically all of our stuff comes in a package. You have to think about all of these deli meats, as well as a lot of our pork, bacon, that kind of stuff. They have things called nitrates and nitrites added into them, which is a preservative. But what's interesting is nitrates and nitrites actually increase your risk for prostate cancer by almost 60%. And so if you're someone that, you know, habitually eats a turkey sandwich for lunch every single day, I would highly recommend you look on the package that you're getting that turkey from, or that ham from, or bologna, or whatever it is, and see, does it say no added nitrates or nitrites on it? So that's going to be my action step for you, is, you know, switch your meats out. So if you're eating deli meat or anything like that, or bacon or turkey bacon or anything like that, make sure on the package it says no nitrates, no nitrates or no nitrites. The animal was not given growth hormone, so no antibiotics and no added hormones to it. And then start looking at some of those bad fats versus good fats.
So when we talk about toxins, you really need to start counting how many chemicals there is compared to how many calories there is in your food, because all these toxins start to really affect how your body is functioning. And you can find them pretty much everywhere now. Let's take a look at glyphosate and BPA and heavy metals. They're very dangerous for our health, and they're very common in our plates. Glyphosate is a herbicide, also known as Roundup. It's used on a lot of different crops, which end up in our food. The EWG, for example, found more glyphosate than declared safe in a lot of foods like oatmeal bars and cereals. And the regulatory entities have declared glyphosate as probably carcinogenic.
Which means cancer causing.
Yeah. What does that really mean? Is it yes, carcinogenic, or no? It's not in between. And a lot of research is showing that it's more carcinogenic than not. BPA is pretty much found in every single plastic containers, and it's a endocrine disruptor, which means that it's messing up with the endocrine system that regulates your hormones. You found it in plastic water bottles, in plastic containers that used for packaged food, in food cans, in cardboards, which leaks into the food. It's acting similar to estrogen in the body, linking it to a lot of hormone-related cancers like prostate and breast cancer, but also thyroid dysfunction, infertility, impotence or heart disease, obesity, and altered behavior. You find that BPA also in toys and baby bottles and other plastic materials that you use every day. So you got to be really careful what you give to your kids, because infants and young children are very sensitive to the effect of BPA. And once again, the FDA that continues to support the use of BPA in the food packages, because the amount that leaches into the food is small But like we learned on the first episode, toxins accumulate in the body. So if you're drinking water from plastic bottles every day, that BPA accumulates in the body and starts affecting the regulation of your hormones. So you got to be really careful to all of that. This diagrams is kind of showing how the toxins are affecting the body. The number one guy has a good detox pathways. The toxins and are cleared out, which prevents the weight gain. Number two shows when the toxins accumulate in the body and the detoxification are not working properly due to unhealthy lifestyle habits and toxins and pesticides and plastics. So you start gaining weight, which is the number three. The National Resource Defense Council says that toxic chemicals in our environment, such as mercury, lead, and certain man-made chemicals, have been linked to cancer, birth defect, brain impairment, reducing or eliminating the load of these dangerous chemicals in the products we buy, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink can help to reduce the toll on human disease and suffering.
And I think that's one of the things I've talked to my patients all the time that say you're on like a weight loss journey, right? Mm-hmm. And you've lost a lot of weight, you're feeling good, you're actually, shedding the pounds and getting some of that inflammation gone. But if you've hit that weight loss plateau, I always tell people the next step is a detox, because at that point, your body cannot metabolize a toxic cell. So as long as the remaining cells left in your body are toxic, the next stage, you can run all you want, right? You're going to have to do some sort of detoxification to aid your body in starting to eliminate those toxicities and open up those detoxification pathways so that your body can start functioning and healing again.
There is a study from 1999 from the CDC that found 219 different chemicals in our blood and urine. And 75 of these chemicals had never been seen before in the blood in the US population. So that's pretty crazy. And when we think that that was 21 years ago, I can't imagine what it is now.
Right? It's really scary. And so, like I said, the best ways, to get oxygen to your body, to open up those detoxification channels, is movement, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be one of the quickest and easiest things you can do. And for some people, I try to explain, I'm like, it doesn't mean an hour at the gym. It doesn't mean, working 45 minutes to an hour. You can get a good sweat on and you can start doing that in anywhere 5 to 7 minutes. Realistically, you can do Tabata stuff, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, or challenge yourself to do, 100 jumping jacks as fast as you can. Burpees are a great way to really kick your butt very quickly. That's another one, doing squats, try to do 100 squats as fast as you can. It's going to get you into that metabolic burn zone. And so when we look at that and we compare classic cardio compared to that metabolic conditioning, if we want to aid our body on a metabolic level and help our body on a cellular level, this is a really great way to do it. And so the biggest thing with classic cardio, when you're on the elliptical just cruising, watching TV, listening to music, doing whatever, it's great for your body, for the cardiovascular system. I'm not going to say classic cardio is bad for you. It's great for the cardiovascular system just to keep that endurance, keep your blood flow going. But as soon as you get off the treadmill, guess what stops? Your metabolism. Yeah, your body stops burning calories, stops, and stops that burn. Now, if you get to the point to where you switch into metabolic afterburn conditioning, which is high intensity interval training, Tabata, sprinters, that kind of stuff, or you do a workout as fast as you possibly can by doing all right, I'm going to do 100 squats as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to do, whatever that looks like at the gym, and I'm going to change this 1 hour workout down to a 30-minute workout. Obviously, technique matters. I get that. Or I'm going to do whatever, but you get yourself to where you're breathing hard, you're going. Have you ever finished the workout and then 30 minutes later you started sweating and you're like, I'm still not breathing right? That means that you kicked your butt, you got yourself into that metabolic conditioning, that metabolic burn, and guess what? It's going to continue going on, even after you leave the gym, you get home, you're driving in the car, your body is still working. Okay. And so obviously I kind of already talked about chiropractic just a little bit, but the biggest thing that we focus on is your nervous system. And so your nervous system controls every single aspect of your body. We know that your brain uses your central nervous system, so your spinal cord, your nerves, to communicate with every single organ, cell, muscle, tissue within your body. And so if you have some sort of interference in there, or when patients come in and tell me that they have had low back pain, not it happened yesterday because they bent over and you had that acute inflammatory response to where you got a pain signal, but they have had low back pain for 10, 15, 20 years. That means you have been putting your body in a state of chronic stress and leading to chronic inflammation. And so even though it's a pain response that's happening, it's still causing an inflammatory response throughout your body, which can lead to disease processes as well as cancer, right? So this is how important it is that it's not okay and it's not normal to be in pain all the time. It's not okay and it's not normal to wake up stiff every single morning and not moving. And so that's one of the things that when I talk about how chiropractic can help with inflammation is I can't even fathom being uncomfortable, because you have to think about, if you're in pain, guess what the rest of that looks like? If you're in pain, that means you're probably not walking or exercising because it hurts. When you're in pain, we go into our stress response, which means we eat worse, we don't feel good, we sleep, we don't sleep appropriately. Our bodies, and it becomes a vicious circle when you're in pain. And so when you've been in pain for an allotted period of time, years, right, your body is shutting down. It's not functioning like it needs to. And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you know that person, your husband, your wife, your parent, your spouse, your friend, that has been talking about their chronic shoulder, or their chronic neck, or their chronic low back pain, tell them that overall, like, that's harming them more than probably what they even realize, because it's not only becoming a vicious cycle in their lifestyle, but it's causing a chronic inflammatory response throughout their body. And so that's what we want to do, is remove that interference, get the body moving like it needs to, and help reduce that inflammatory response. And so I talk a lot about balance, and I earlier talked about it with like your pH levels within your body, but your body is supposed to be at homeostasis. Homeostasis is normal, right? And so we have something called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And all day long, we are looking for balance. And so what happens naturally is your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, like it's your fight or flight response when your body's preparing for strenuous activity, when you've been scared, when you're in danger, right? When you're being chased by a bear, something like that. That is your body's sympathetic reactive nervous system. This is supposed to kick in. And when that happens, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your pupils actually dilate so that you can even see clearer, right? Guess what? Your digestive system and your reproductive organs shut off, because you don't need to be thinking about food right now. You don't need to be thinking about sleeping. You are in a survival state, right? It is a sympathetic response to make sure that your body can make it through whatever dangerous position that you're in right now, or stress response. Now, the catch is when you are out of danger, you're supposed to come back to normal, right? You're supposed to come back to homeostasis. And then we are also then supposed to move into something called your parasympathetic response, which is rest and digest. And so these are your basic functions. So like digesting your food, which takes hours, sleeping, recovering on a cellular level, right? Calming the brain, letting the brain rest, not being on all the time. But you also can't stay there all day long, even though sometimes that sounds nice. I think I just like to eat and rest all the time and just be stuck in my parasympathetics. But unfortunately, we need to be in that state of homeostasis. And so the problem that we see with people is when you get stuck on one end or the other and you're not able to fluctuate appropriately. So when patients get stuck in that sympathetic response, we're high stress, type A, going all the time, high anxiety, can't shut down, can't turn off. And guess what kind of things that we see happening in the body with that? Most people that are in that stress response, sympathetic stress response constantly, most often have digestive issues. Right? They have trouble sleeping, insomnia, right? And so when you start seeing that and you're like, wow, now that I understand that there's two systems here, and if I'm always up here in the sympathetic response, my body is never getting into rest and digest. So no wonder I'm having some of these other symptoms, right? And now the problem with that is, what if you're there for a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? That's when the body starts going to what we call like exhaustion. It can't do it anymore. It can't stay there. It has to recover. It has to heal. And so this is when we start to see that global shutdown happening in people. And so what our ultimate goal is what can we do to restore homeostasis within the body as best as possible? And it can't happen by only choosing one of the essentials. It has to happen by choosing all 5 of them and appropriately addressing the structural issues that might be going on in your body, the metabolic issues that might be going on in your body, the stress and hormonal issues that might be going on in your body, the exercise, and decreasing that toxic load. And so that's one of the things that when we start to put all of that together, that's when we start to see people actually healing and functioning and feeling like they quote unquote got their lives back, right? So I just wanted to quickly just kind of roll through a couple things that you can do, right, supplement wise, just because in general it's very difficult to get all of our nutrients and minerals and everything that we need for our bodies just straight from diet. So one of the things that I don't think people know a lot about is something called curcumin, or AKA turmeric, right? So curcumin is the active compound that's in turmeric, and it is a known anti-inflammatory, right? So it's kind of an orange spice, commonly used in a lot of Indian foods. It can actually help eliminate cancer cells without harming healthy cells. Now, I'm not telling you that curcumin or turmeric will cure cancer, so don't take it that way. But I'm talking about the fact that it helps with inflammation in the body on a cellular level. And so it can also help with like joint health. It can help, anything else with curcumin? Sorry, it's an anti-inflammatory. It's really, it's an anti-inflammatory. And so like, we use it like, whenever like my shoulders are hurting because we adjust a lot, or our low back, or any sort of injuries flaring up, or I twisted my ankle over the weekend and I have an inflammatory response going on. We usually increase our amount of curcumin. We also cook with it pretty regularly. We put it on our vegetables. We put it in soups. We put it in broths, just because it's a great way just to get that natural anti-inflammatory, within your body, just because like I said, we can do all the right things, but unfortunately there's things out of our control that we're exposed to, and so we just want to help our body in that manner. The next one is something called DIM. This is something that a lot of people have never heard of before, and it's really important, especially when you start talking about like hormones. So DIM is something that helps regulate estrogen within the body. So we know that a lot of like breast cancers, hormonal cancers are some sort of imbalance within estrogen, testosterone, that kind of stuff within the body. And so DIM is something that the body actually produces itself, but sometimes not in the proper ratio, that helps prevent estrogen dominance, right? It helps keep that balance through there. And the problem is if we have estrogen dominance, that can actually increase your risk for breast cancer, increase your risk for prostate cancer. And so the good news is you can get DIM naturally through things like cruciferous vegetables. So if you don't know what that is, I'm going to ask you to Google it because it's something that you should know. But they're things like Brussels sprouts, your broccolis. I feel like why am I missing one? Cauliflower, leafy greens. Those are your good cruciferous vegetables. Kale, yes. Now the problem with it is to get the amount of DIM that you need daily, you should be eating 2 to 3 pounds of cruciferous vegetables, which is very difficult to do. And so that's why we talk about supplementing with something with DIM. So we have a couple supplements in the office. We have DIM specifically that's just bioavailable DIM that your body can utilize. But we also have it within our women's hormone balancing, and it's also within our prostate health supplement. Garlic, everyone knows about garlic. Obviously it's delicious. The more garlic, the better in my choice. But the reason that people like garlic, and it actually has a ton of health benefits, is because of its unique sulfur compounds. And so people have talked about, there's actually research that's linked garlic to reducing the risk of certain cancers. But it is also really good just to consume by regularly, or there's something called garlic oil. So it's a great alternative to it's also an anti-inflammatory, as well as it keeps the vampires away.
And supporting the immune system.
Yeah, and it supports your immune system. Boom. Yes, and it keeps the vampires away. And then the last one we're talking about is probiotics. So last week when we were talking about gut health, I talked about how important it is to supplement with probiotics. But the catch with that is if you should be rotating your probiotics if you're taking a probiotic supplement, because the catch is you have hundreds of thousands to millions of different strands of bacteria in your digestive system. And so the problem is if you've been on the same probiotic for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years without rotating it and doing different things, you are creating an overgrowth in just the specific strains of bacteria that's in your probiotic. And so I recommend switching your probiotics pretty much every 4 to 6 months so that you're constantly getting different ones and supporting your immune system and helping with the bacteria. But that's also the reason that I like getting your probiotics and live probiotics through fermented foods, because with fermented foods, it's not just one strand of bacteria or one strand of probiotics you're getting a multitude of different probiotics, and each fermentation actually changes the probiotics within the food. So the more different kinds of fermented foods that you could be consuming, it'll start to change and balance out that good, healthy gut bacteria. So in our gut, bacteria is good. That's what we like, right? But we want the good bacteria, not the bad bacteria, and we want a good, healthy balance within that. Also helps support your immune system. And so these were just an example of some of those things that I talked about. So we do have a good quality probiotic here, but I would most definitely recommend try to get as much as you can live from your foods. All right, next week we are going to be talking about the nervous system and how important taking care of your body on a physical level is. We're going to be going through just not only things that you can do with your workstation, if you're working from home, if you're working at the office, going through ergonomics and how important that is, that right now structurally we want where we want to be physically. We're going to talk about posture. We're going to talk a little bit more just about how the body functions, and then what can you do to make sure that you're not adding physical stress, which could cause inflammation or degeneration or arthritis, anything like that. And then I think our last week, I think I'm going to switch it up, and I think we should do holiday stress because the holidays are coming up. And so I want to just really kind of walk through and give you guys some great tools when it comes to diet during the holidays, some great alternatives and swaps for your favorite Thanksgiving and Christmas meals, and then also how to handle holiday stress, because it's not like 2020 hasn't been stressful so far. Let's go ahead and add in the holidays. So those are things that I'm really excited to talk about. And please post any questions that you guys might have from tonight. Please feel free to email the office if you need any other resources. And we hope you guys have a great evening.
Bye.